So exciting news!
We actually got to do another author interview, this time with Peadar Ó Guilín, the author of The Call.
If you don't remember, we read The Call in 2016. It was this weird, creepy YA horror book about fairies, and there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, there's creepy books about fairies, and then there's this book.
So we got to sit down and talk to Peadar about The Call and Irish mythology, and it was just so much fun.
He's a great conversationalist, tells great stories. We hope that this interview answered some of your guys' questions.
So I guess we just have some questions and have a conversation and
go from there.
Yeah.
Hey.
Just tell us kind of a little bit about your writing process. How did you originally start writing The Call?
Yeah, well, how I usually start is I'm one of these people who thinks that one good idea is not enough for a book. I think you need two, and I think they need to be two very different ideas. And when they hit each other, do you know what I mean? When they crash into each other, I think you get enough for a book. You know, you get lots of overlap and strange things happening. And so I had an idea. A few years ago, I was out for a walk, and I just had a vision of people disappearing. They'd be in a crowded room, the person would disappear, and all their clothing would be on the ground. And the thought that came to me then was that everybody else knew what had happened to them. It was a surprise, but it wasn't a shock. They knew what had happened. They knew it was something terrible. And the important part of the idea is they knew that the person who had disappeared was probably dead. Now, if they were definitely dead, in my mind, there's no tension. They're definitely dead. That's horrible. It's really sad, but that's all there is to it. They're probably dead means people are very tense, but they might survive. And that little might, that little 5% of might, you know what I mean, is enough to keep people just hanging on going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, do they get out? Are they alive? Are they dead? Have they been, transformed in some horrible way? And that's kind of what I thought, a bit like Schrodinger's cat. Is the cat dead or is it alive? That wonderful joke I saw, a cartoon where Dr. Schrodinger's at the vet, and the vet comes out and he says, I've got good news and I've got bad news. That kind of was what I was thinking. But that was only one idea, if you like. And then the follow-up, or the second idea to go with it, was this little thing that happened in Irish legend a very long time ago, where the fairies they weren't called the fairies, but the people of the mounds, as they would be called in Irish, the She or the Sheeda or the Sheed, they were kicked out of Ireland, they were expelled. And my thought was always, if you've been expelled from your land, are you going to grant wishes to people that expelled you? Are you going to sit on a toadstool in a lovely diaphanous dress and say, oh, I think you're dreaming? No, I don't think so. I think you would feel very, very badly about it. And you would constantly be wanting to get your own back. So it was the marriage of those two things that kind of made the book. And once I had that, I could start writing it. And then when I write, I'm what they call a pantser. I don't plan. I just sit down, I have the basic ideas, let's see what happens. And for example, in those scenes when people were kidnapped away to the Grey Land, when I started writing each of those scenes, I didn't know if this person was going to live or die myself. I didn't actually know. And my hope was that the readers wouldn't know either, and that the readers would therefore feel the tension of it. And that's also why I wrote it in the present tense. Again, I don't know as I'm writing it. My hope is to kind of get across the idea that I don't know that, and that maybe the readers would feel a bit tense when they were reading it.
Well, it worked, so.
Thank you very much.
They were probably my favorite scenes in the book.
Yeah, it was when they go there and you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be crazy.
It's very disorienting.
Were you kind of fascinated by fairies kind of before the idea came to you, or is it just kind of like an out of the blue thing?
Oh no, I've always been interested in Irish mythology. I mean, I'm interested in any mythology because, you know, that famous saying, "The past is a foreign country."
Mm-hmm.
It is. They thought very, very differently from us. You know, they had some very weird ideas, but at the same time, they were human and they were the same as us. I came across recently an ancient Irish poem. It's very, very short, but the translation was basically, there is a woman from around here, and I won't tell you her name, but her farts are like sling stones. You know, you see something like that, and you think, you know, they weren't sitting around being miserable all the time in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, funny people, and they were interesting and, you know, fascinating. But at the same time, you know, they had units of currency which were one slave boy, two, you know, this number of cows. So they thought very differently as well, you know. So I've always been interested by that, and you can see their weird ways of thinking in their legends. You know, you see these stories, you know, even if you think of ones that, you know, Billy Goat Gruff, you know, you've got this troll living under a bridge. This isn't an Irish one, but you've got a troll living under a bridge. And the goat comes along and the troll says, "I'm going to eat you." And the goat says, "Oh, please don't. My brother's coming along who's much bigger." And the troll says, "Oh, all right then." And the troll lets the little goat grow, or little goat go. And then the next one comes along and the next one. And the weird thing is that the troll trusts the goat, but also that the goat is telling the truth. You know, this kind of sense of inevitability, that this thing is just going to happen and everyone in the story believes it. It's just, we wouldn't think like that nowadays. If I came along, I'd say, "Oh yes, my brother is coming. I don't even have a brother." You know what I mean? I would say that just to get away. Or I wouldn't go near the troll in the first place. Maybe let's make that compromise. I won't try and cross the bridge. Listen, I'll do without the bridge. It's okay. You know. So, yes, always been interested.
And how did you come up with kind of like the horror elements of the story? Like where they're very like, you know, what they turn you into and like how they kind of torture you and all that.
You know, the way that I say that the Sheeda in it are kind of artistic almost, that they have a sense of humour and so on and so on. It's not really them, it's me. I have when I was a child, my father was a surgeon. And I lived in this house where he kept souvenirs. Now, he wasn't a weird or a scared man in any way at all. He was not like that at all. I don't want to give you the impression he was like something out of a horror novel. He wasn't. He was a loving and kind father who happened to be a surgeon, you know, which means that you're up to your elbows in someone's guts all day long, or reading about it or studying how to do it and so on. And there were souvenirs in the house. And there were, you know, things in jars, and there were big thick books of surgery with, you know, pictures of things. And then when I was 14, my dad got me a summer job helping clean up after operations.
Oh,
and I discovered I have a really high tolerance. You know, I mean, I don't go out murdering people usually, but
Usually.
Saturday, it's my day off, obviously. Look at my back garden and don't ask me why all the neighborhood pets have disappeared. Just a coincidence. But I grew up with a really high tolerance, and there was someone put this saying out on it was a tweet on Twitter the other day, and I don't know, I can't remember for the life of me who the original person was, but the gist of it was that if the author isn't feeling love, you know, the reader isn't feeling love. If the author isn't feeling horrified, the reader isn't feeling horrified. Like, you have to feel it yourself because you're communicating to other people via words. Words are not a perfect snapshot of what's in your head. And everyone is going to come to it differently anyway. So it's like you're talking to someone through 6 thick towels, you know, and trying to get across what you're feeling. So things have to be stronger. Love has to be more passionate, and violence has to be more violent, or the reader isn't going to get a tenth of what you're feeling. So you have to feel it yourself. You have to love your characters, or the reader isn't going to love them. You have to be afraid for them, or the reader isn't going to be afraid for them. So that's why my things are a little extreme, I think. But I think a lot of YA stuff is extreme for that reason. Like it's usually more than you would find in real life. Although, of course, there are incredible things in real life as well, but we rarely encounter them day to day.
And the landscape for Fairyland, like what kind of like inspired like some of the elements in there? Well,
it's a bit like that extreme thing I was talking about. When people come along and they take somebody else's land, they don't say to them, "Oh, well, we're taking your land, and we're only doing that because here's some much better land and you can have it. Congratulations. Here's what we ourselves aren't going to live there. We're going to live in your crappy land, but you can live in this much better land. Off you go." No, what generally happens is they find the worst, awful place where no one wants to go, and that's where you go. When Cromwell came to Ireland with his soldiers, he basically beat the living daylights out of us. And at the end of that process, he wanted the good land to pay his soldiers with. And his famous line to the Irish was, "To hell or to Connacht." And Connacht was where all the bad land was. So either I'll kill you all, or you go to Connacht. Now, I don't want to kill you. That would be a nasty thing to do. Off you go to Connacht. And that's generally what happens again and again and again in history. So if the Sheatha were getting kicked out of Ireland, where are they going to go? Are they going to go to the Blessed Isles? Because some Irish legends say, oh, they went to the Land of Youth, or they went to High Brazil, or they went to the Blessed Isles. All of these are really, really nice places. But to my mind, that's not what happens in history. What happens in history is they go to the worst place. And the worse it is, the less friendly they are going to be towards us. Mm-hmm. You may remember that in the Grey Land there's this phenomenon called windows, where the Sheatha get to see what our world is like. And they see the really nice things. And that's really only there to torture them. You know what I mean? Because it's just a constant reminder that they're living in hell and we're living in this. I mean, if you imagine people in the third world living in appalling conditions, but they've got TVs showing them our soap operas and constantly reminded of how well we live and how rich we are, driving around in cars while they're barely able to feed themselves. It was kind of inspired by that sort of thing. Here's a window into paradise, just to remind you of where you are. So I had to make it as bad as possible, as extreme as possible, to make them hate us as much as possible, because if they don't hate us that much, they won't be willing to do those terrible things that they're willing to do.
So working with such extremes, specifically to go back to the torture scenes, were there any issues with the publisher asking you to maybe dial it back a little bit, or did they give you free rein?
I wasn't really asked to dial it back much. There were a few tiny places I dialed myself back. I dialed myself back a few times. And I thought when I put the call out, see, my very first book was The Inferior, and it's written from the point of view of cannibals. And the idea of the book is that by the time you've read the book, you sympathize with the cannibals. You think, you know, you have a terrible life and all that, but it's actually not your fault. I would do the same if I were you. And I would either do the same as you or I would die. And that's basically what happens. People, there are scenes in the book where people have a choice of joining with the cannibals or dying. And that's kind of the thing that happens. And a lot of people read that. A lot of vegetarians. I'm vegan, you know. So I just put that across. But a lot of my fellow vegetarians were horrified by the things that happened. So when I wrote the call, I thought, well, no one will think that this time. Well done, Paddy. You've really dialed yourself down. This is really calm and quiet and, you know, really quite mild, you know, scenes of violence. But no, I'm getting a lot of 1-star reviews of people going, I don't want my children to read this. Getting a lot of those kind of things. And in my current book, which is a sequel to The Call, I just got some edits back from my editor. We're nearly finished. And she's going, yeah, but does it have to be so violent? It's not so bad. I mean, there is one scene in that book where I horrified myself, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be asked to tone this one down. But it's actually a different one altogether. So we'll see. You know, I don't mean to be bad. I'm trying to be a good boy. My mother will be angry, but anyway, this is what happens.
Was there a tough character to write? In like either the first or the second one?
I think in the first one, the toughest character for me to write was Connor, because really what I wanted to do, you know, I'm sure you guys have read George R. R. Martin, or maybe you've seen the movies or the TV series or whatever. Mm-hmm. The wonderful, amazing trick that he pulls off, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is that you read the first book and those Lannisters, oh my God, you hate them, what monsters. And then you read the second and the third book and you kind of go, you know what, Jamie's actually, I can kind of understand where he's coming from, and, you know, I don't blame him. That kind of feeling, you kind of get some sympathy for him, and a lot of people have him as their favorite character now, you know. And I really think when I read that, I thought, you know what, I want to do that with all my characters, because basically everybody, you know, when you get to understand them, if you're in their shoes, maybe you would have done the same thing, you know, or you would at least have been tempted to do the same thing. But I don't like bullies at all, due to experiences at school that a lot of us have had, a lot of people have had, especially people who read books for whatever reason. Why? But, you know, I had a few experiences there, and I just don't like bullies, and I just wasn't able to make him sympathetic in any way. I just felt nothing for him myself at all except contempt. So I feel that was a bit of a failure on my part, but, you know, we'll move on to the next one and play again, you know?
I kind of like that he wasn't sympathetic, because I feel like there are those people out there that you're never going to understand who they are, right? And so sometimes you just have to deal with it. So,
and I mean, it adds another layer to the story, because you have the evil of like the Fae, and then you have a more human evil that you're dealing with. So
yeah, I really
well, he's definitely evil in my mind. Yeah.
So I personally enjoyed that I had no sympathy for him.
Well, he speaks very highly of you, you know.
Did you find a lot of any humanity in the fairies when you were writing them?
Well, there is some humanity in them. I mean, one thing I wanted is for them to be quite alien, mm-hmm. for them to be not like us. There's an Irish story about the devil, and it's quite short, but basically there's a guy he's a hunchback, and it's dark and it's late at night, and he's told never go into the woods, never go into the woods, but he needs a shortcut home because it's very late, and he's not supposed to go into the woods because the devil lives in the woods, but he doesn't believe in the devil, not really. And he's got to get home. So he walks into the woods and he hears this noise and he's terrified, and the devil jumps out, and the devil goes, ah, ha, 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 touches him on the back and says, give me that hump, and takes it. And so he arrives back home and he's not a hunchback anymore. It's gone. He walks perfectly straight and he can't believe what happened. So he's working in this tavern, and there's a guy working in the tavern who's got a club foot. And the guy with the club foot says, what happened to your hump? And the guy says, the devil took it away. So that night, the guy with the club foot, he walks into the forest and he's terrified because he doesn't want to meet the devil. But you know, it worked for his friend. So he walks in there, hears this noise, jumps, terrified. The devil appears suddenly in front of him and goes, ha 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 ha, have a hump. That was kind of how I was thinking of them, you know, just not something we can easily understand. Yeah. They could do anything. They're capable of anything, and we wouldn't necessarily know why or understand why they were doing it. But at the same time, I told you the story of Cromwell and what he said to the Irish and how he basically sent us away, to the poorer areas. And you've probably heard of the Irish potato famine. That, in a way, that came out of that decision, because the only thing they could grow to feed themselves by the time we reach the 1800s are potatoes. Nothing else will grow there. And, you end up with a monoculture, and then when the potatoes get a disease, that's it. Like, there is nothing else, So it's all connected in a way. So we have, how should I put it, in this country, we have a tradition of sympathizing with people who are in that position, people whose lands are taken. So in a strange kind of way, the fairies are us, really. They are our obsession with getting our land back, which Irish people have a very strong affinity for land. Now we're changing now. We're much richer than we were, back in the 1950s or the 40s. We're one of the richest countries in the world now. And that's great. And we're kind of losing then that obsession with owning land. But it's there in our culture. And so the humanity I see in the fairies is that they have a just case. They're doing awful, awful things, but when you see where they're living, when you see what they have to put up with all day, they're all gone totally insane with what they've had to put up with. You can kind of, I think, who am I to say? I'm not the reader, but I think you would see their point of view, even though, obviously, if you were in the position of the humans, you would do everything you can in your power to defeat them because, you would have to. But I think there is a kind of a sympathy there, at least on my part.
Yeah, I really enjoyed them, too.
I liked that there was that aspect of, like, a sympathy, but you didn't really explain too much. Because I find that the more motivation you give a villain who's supposed to be unknowable is when they stop being scary. It's like if Jaws showed the shark more.
Yeah. So that was really good. Yeah. What about Nessa? She was like a really interesting character because she was so, I guess, like motivated to just do everything she can no matter what the odds. So what were some like challenges and high points for writing her?
Well, I'm a little bit in love with her, obviously she'd be far too young for me, but you know what I mean in terms of her character, in terms of her strength. I always admire characters who are trying. Mm-hmm. Always. And I find, the way sometimes your people describe a book. I didn't like the character because the character was whiny. I'm like that too. I don't like characters who feel they can just give up and who give up. I'm not saying there aren't people like that. I'm not saying I'm not like that on occasion. I am. You should see me when I get the flu. It's really not pleasant. But I'm not the character in a book. And I think you're going to feel more interested in someone who's trying. Mm-hmm. Like someone who's trying. And the other thing then is when I create characters, the one thing I'm always looking for is, it's almost like a yearbook. You Americans have these yearbook things. And it's person. Are you American?
We're Canadian.
Canadians. I just thought. Sorry about that. I meant North Americans. North. I was coughing there. North Americans. You probably just missed that part there.
Well, we'll let it slide.
Yeah, but the way those Americans down there across the border, the way they have their yearbook and they have this thing, most likely to succeed or most likely to be eaten by Jaws or whatever in their yearbook. The person I'm looking for is the person least likely to survive a particular situation, but I'm going to try and make them anyway, mm-hmm. if you know what I mean. So in my first book, The Inferior, the main character he comes from a people who are so desperate to survive that anyone who's injured and isn't going to heal, they basically swap them for food from other tribes, because that's basically how desperate they are. Anyone who's in any way not useful has to go. That's all there is to it. People who get old, I'm sorry, that's all there is to it. There is no way around it. And so the main character, he has a terrible stutter. to such a point that people think, you know, I mean, they're quite primitive people. They don't understand that having a stutter doesn't mean that your intellectual capacity is perfectly normal. They don't get that. And so they constantly want to sacrifice him. They're constantly thinking, oh, things are pretty hard at the moment. Who will we get rid of? You know, he's always at the bottom of the list. So I'm always looking for that person. I'm always looking for the person no one expects to survive her, who shouldn't survive. And then I try and get them through it. I try and figure a way, you know, for them to get through it. So that's generally how I do it.
Did you have like any like challenges kind of figuring out like how she was going to overcome like her like polio kind of, like were there like moments where you're like, I don't know how she would do this? Like
Yes, there were lots of moments. In fact, for about, I'd say 3/4 of the book, I had no idea how she was going to get out. Now, my usual thing, the thing I like doing, because I'm a pantser, as I said, because I don't plan, I like to take advantage of that. And so one of the things I love to do is I put a character in an impossible situation, then I find a way to make it worse. 100 times worse if I can. And I have no clue how they're going to, I mean, it's already impossible. Now I've made it far worse. I've no clue how they're going to get out of it. I'm hoping the reader will have no clue either. But the thing is, I can spend 6 months thinking about it. The character lying on the ground surrounded by monsters has no time. But I can spend months thinking about it until I figure out something that isn't stupid that will get them out of it. And I find that very exciting. And I've actually noticed in movies or in other people's books, I've noticed people who use the same thing. I don't know if they know they're doing it or if they deliberately know they're doing it, but you see it again and again, and it always works. It always heightens the tension, you know? I love that.
Is there a character that you know would probably be you if you were in there, like if you had to go through the call?
None of them would have got that far. There are aspects of me in several of the characters. There are aspects of me in Antoinette. There are aspects of me in Anto as well, but only aspects. I'm nowhere near as brave as he is, or as, how should I put it, as ethical as he is. Like I told you, I'm a vegan, but I became a vegan for my health. I was suffering from a few minor issues, you know, that I needed to sort out. It wasn't because I was worried for the lives of others like he would be, you know what I mean? So there are definitely aspects of me in a lot of the characters. And then there are characters that have none of me at all. I have none of Megan, nothing. I would love to be Megan. I would love to be brave, you know, and just devil may care the way she is. She can just say anything to anyone and not worry about it. I would love that. But that is definitely not me at all.
I don't think I would survive.
No, I wouldn't either. I feel like I'm going to try really hard and it's great, but it's not happening.
Well, you know, we ourselves, you know, we've grown up in very soft societies, and that's great, and long may they last, you know, but we have. And life has been quite easy for us. But, you know, if someone gets you at the very start and starts training you, and, you know, we would all be completely different people. We would all be a lot more athletic. We would all be, you know, all the knowledge we have about books and other things we wouldn't have, but we would have knowledge about, oh, I can use this tree, or I can hide here, or, you know, we would have a whole different set of knowledge. We would just be different people. As we are now, no, we wouldn't survive. But as the different people we might have become, who knows? And the other thing I always say about the call is, if you find yourself there tomorrow, I hope you don't, and if my fingers crossed that you don't, but if you do, you should always try, because luck comes into it. You know, luck, some characters just appear in the wrong place. Some characters are just lucky. Some characters find somewhere to hide. Luck comes into it. You should always go. The Sheila might trip up and break their faces. You don't know what's going to happen. You should always try. So
what are your kind of, like, where are you headed in the next book, sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I guess we're close to Spoilersville here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you haven't read the first book, at this point, you should close your eyes and possibly go to bed, go to sleep. You know, have you no life?
Ugh.
Go to bed, for goodness sake. Okay, so I'm kind of into spoilery territory here now. So we know from the last book, one thing we know is that not everyone who survives the call did so legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have made deals. And you can imagine that if you were running a country and suddenly you realized that the country is full of people, some of whom have made deals with the enemy, what are you going to do as a government? I think some people in the United States are finding out
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
in a very, very bad way. But, you know, any government at all is going to be worried about that. And is going to start looking askance at people who survived, who maybe shouldn't have survived, who no one expected to survive, and yet suddenly they survived. So if we know anybody like that, their life might be about to become very, very difficult indeed. And meanwhile, at the same time, our friends in the Greyland, have they given up? I don't think so. I think they're closer than ever to getting what they want, because I think we've made mention in the first book already that the two worlds are getting closer together all the time. And that's making it easier and easier for them to manifest here, for example. So things are about to get... We're taking a massive leap forward in terms of threat in the next book. It's just going to... It's going to go way, way beyond where we are in the first book. Be much more threatening and much more terrible, I would think.
And a whole lot more exciting.
It depends. You know, I mean, any book, as you guys know very well, any book is all about, do you love the character? Is that character in danger? Do we care? You know, it's all about, do you care? And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a story about a love triangle. Do you care about the characters? Do you want those two to get together? No, maybe you want those two to get together. It's all about, do you care? That's really all that matters. And the scale, I mean, if you have, 5 million scorpions chasing you or only 5,000, there really isn't that much difference.
No.
So it's kind of up to me to make you feel that things have suddenly flipped. You know what I mean? It's up to me to try and make you feel that the threat level is higher. And whether I do or not, well, we won't know, you know what I mean, until it gets out into the world. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Do you have a kind of an idea of when it's going to eventually come out?
I believe, well, I've heard different things. It depends on when it's officially finished. So what does officially finished mean? Well, my editors have told me, yes, this is it now. We're finally at a place where, the book is great and things are great and everyone's going to be happy and everything's brilliant, but could you kindly fix X, Y, and Z? I'm fixing X, Y, and Z at the moment, and I hope to hand that in by the end of February, but they might say, no, you didn't. I'm not satisfied that X, Y, and Z are fixed. And who knows when they'll be satisfied? Like, it's not one of these, if George R. R. Martin brings out a new book tomorrow, I guarantee you it will be published as soon as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
As soon as possible. But when you're not George R. R. Martin, there are schedules, there are slots. And if you miss your slot, it might be 6 months before another slot comes through. Because there are lots of other books being published by fantastic authors and they all have to come out as well, you know what I mean? And you can't just take one of their slots, So my hope, if all things go amazingly well, my publishers will say, yes, X, Y, and Z are brilliant. They will hand them to my US publishers, who are Scholastic, and if they say, oh my God, we don't even have an X, Y, and Z, we don't even have anything, everything is just perfect, I've never seen anything so perfect. In this manuscript, there's actually nothing wrong with this. We're not even changed the word biscuits to cookies this time. We're not. So if that happens, it could come out in September. More realistically, probably people will have issues. And that's just life. And more realistically, I would say the end of this year, 2017. So, but I would love if it were September.
And you had mentioned earlier that, like, a lot of parents were like, My kid's not gonna read this. This is way too intense. Have you had a lot of kind of younger kids who maybe haven't been censored by their parents commenting on it at all?
Yes. And you know what? The kids have no problem. The kids have absolutely no problem at all. I mean, I remember when I was an adolescent, I remember going down incredibly dangerous steep hills with no brakes. I remember one time hanging from a branch above a very tall drop with people down at the bottom throwing stones at me. I did all kinds of things, you know, and I wasn't a particularly, you know, mad kid or anything, you know, but kids have I think, well, kid is a terrible thing to say for someone who's already 14 or whatever, but you know what I mean? Their sense of what is scary is a lot less than someone who's a parent. It's like when people become parents, suddenly they go, oh, it's not me that's in trouble, it's my kid. Mm-hmm. And then when they read a book like this or like The Hunger Games or whatever, they're thinking of their kids. They're not thinking of, oh my goodness, if I were in The Hunger Games, I would do this. No, they're thinking, oh my God, my poor, you know, Melanie, like she, you know, she's terrified even of whatever, you know, and that's what they think of. Whereas kids themselves generally read fine and don't worry as much.
Neil Gaiman said something similar to that when he was talking about Coraline and how the kids read it as an adventure story and the parents read it as this horrific horror novel.
Yes, no, totally agree. It's exactly right.
That was all my questions.
That was all your questions?
Yeah.
So what are you reading right now?
Speaking of Neil Gaiman, I just finished. I got vouchers from my day job, and I bought this massive, I mean, gigantic, several thousand page thing of the Sandman.
Oh, I love Sandman.
Oh, well, this is fantastic. I read the whole thing in a few days, but it's gigantic. I've actually got muscles now since I bought it, you know, just from reading it. Yeah. That was pretty good. So I've just finished that. I've got a whole pile of books from Australia because I'm going there in a few weeks for some writers' festival. Cool. And the organisers sent me books of the other writers, and I have the new one, Frog Kisser, from Garth Nix. I've met him a few times. He's a lovely, lovely guy. So I want to read that before I'm on a panel with him, obviously. So that's coming very soon for me. But currently, I think I'm reading. I am definitely reading a Robert Harris book, Lustrum. So, yeah. What about you guys? Anything good?
I'm about to start reading Norse Mythology, the new Neil Gaiman book.
Oh, cool, yeah.
I'm super excited for.
Yeah. And on my list is the second book, Golden Sun, after Red Rising.
Yes. See, they're violent. I'm not violent. They're violent.
No.
You know, I'm actually very gentle and kind.
Yeah. My problem is I always recommend books to people and I haven't read the second or third one, so then they get ahead of me and they're like, this is so awesome, and I'm like, I have no time. So I'm like trying to catch up.
And I got Nevernight, the J. Kristoff dark fantasy book. I didn't read it and I want to read that, and it's supposed to be quite dark.
It's very violent too. Yeah. So, you know, you guys, you've got a lot of violence ahead of you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as usual.
Yeah.
What panel are you on at the Australian Festival?
I'm on several things, and I actually can't remember what the Garth Nix one is. I'm on one about Irish folklore.
Ooh.
I'm actually doing, this is a thing I love to do, where I sit down with a whole pile of kids and just tell them Irish legends. So I'm going to pick some of the, like, Irish legends are amazing. They've got everything you could think of. They're really funny. They're really horrible. They're really dark. They're stupid, some of them. They're amazing stories. And I'm going to pick ones that aren't so horrible, I think, for the little kids. Not that they'll mind, but their parents will mind. So that's my plan anyway. I'll tell some of those.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Any more questions, Bet?
I think I'm good. I don't think I have any more questions.
Yeah. So that's everything we've planned to ask. Is there anything you feel like you want to share or tell us? Or
yeah, I don't know. I should have thought of this beforehand. But you know, all I've got now are germs, I'm afraid. So yeah, Yeah, but I will be in Australia. If any of your listeners are in Australia, in Sydney or Brisbane, I'll be doing events in bookshops there, and I'll be at the Perth Writers Festival. I'll be going to WorldCon. I'll be going to LuxCon. I'll be, I'll be about a bit. So if any of your listeners are in any of those places, come and say hi. I'm not as terrifying as I appear.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure.
It has been for me. It has. I'm sorry about the noise.
That's all right.
No, it's okay. Maybe we'll do another interview with you after your next book comes out.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Be fantastic. Just let me know. That would be great.
Will do.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Nice to meet
too.
you. See ya.
Thanks so much again to Peadar for the interview. It was quite entertaining. God, that story about the devil and the hunchback, I just
like,
lost it.
Yeah, you said after, you're like, that is the perfect story to tell both of us.
That is our sense of humor to a T. And I've been telling people that story, now, just as a joke, because I'm just like, yes.
So we're both excited for the sequel to The Call when that comes out.
If you guys have read the book, give us a shout and give Peadar all your love. Bye, guys.